talking with Julie, a construction management professional, about ways that she's used digital identity to help her at construction sites. So, my first question to introduce you back, and by the way, I'm John Simion, the host of Fire Up Connect today. I'd like to ask you a question about how would you compare or track if I showed up to the site or I didn't show up to the site and I tracked my hours and maybe I submitted a bill for that and you kind of knew that I wasn't there. How could you check normally, and how would you check it if you had a digital ID? What would you do?
Well, there really isn't it. Like I said, everything's on the honor system. There really isn't a way to keep track of it. And if the foreman says there's 40 people on the site, that's what we go by. We don't count every person on site every day. It's just unrealistic when you're at a height of a project with 150 people on site. So
That sounds like the wild, wild west.
it can be definitely.
Wow, that's crazy. So, okay, so what types of projects would you use that would benefit? Like what types of projects would benefit from this? What types of owners would benefit from this? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course, yes. So, I mean, any project, you could even use this type of system if you were a small residential general contractor. If you're a small residential general contractor and you're managing, let's say, 3 or 4 houses at a time, you're able to manage by having people scan in. You're able to know how many electricians were on each project, on each site, how many plumbers, how many drywallers, and you're paying the proper amount. So there is no way for them to say, hey, I had 10 guys on site and this is how much you owe me for time and materials. Instead, you know exactly how many people were on site, how long they were on site, and so you're paying them, you know, properly.
Well, not to move to a whole nother industry, but I know that you have a military background. Have you ever seen anything like digital identity in your working in the military?
No, the military is another, kind of archaic industry in that sense. I really do think digital identity would benefit the military. A lot of soldiers and service personnel have a lot of paper trails involved in their career. They have to track annual training, they have to track their military fitness, they have to track their clothing records. All of this is very hard to carry around with you. It's hard to get a hold of the documentation if you lose it. So having digital identity, I think, would be very beneficial to the military.
So they're still using paper certificates for
They
tracking
are.
everything.
Yes,
Wow,
paper certificates that get uploaded
that's
onto.
crazy. So
Yeah.
basically you could put your entire wall of certificates behind you and represent that on a phone, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. I've also I've heard other companies have tried using the same type of technology for COVID-19. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, a lot of companies are using methods of tracking. So for COVID-19, in case somebody gets sick, they can see every person that had interactions with that person. Virtual badge or identity tracking. I just say virtual badge because I've used it a lot, but a lot of digital identifications could be very useful in that aspect. You could clock in if a company requires you to answer a couple of questions, the standard, do you have a cold, fever, taste? All of that can be answered on your daily check-in.
They would know like if you had a vaccination or if you had tested negative, for instance. Is that what you're saying too?
That as well, yeah. If you can put vaccine cards on there, if a company requires it, and you can know who's vaccinated and who's not, and who's been exposed.
That's really interesting. what other kind of information do you know of that you could like plug into this kind of solution?
I think training is a big one. Currently on construction sites, everybody's training paperwork, their OSHA 10, their OSHA 30, their hoisting license, et cetera, is all um, basically Xeroxed and put into a binder and sits inside of a project trailer for when the safety department comes by and does spot inspections, or if OSHA comes by and does an inspection. Usually they bring out the binder and they go through each page and make sure that all the employees that have touched the site have the proper training that they're required to. um, and a lot of this could be, easily accessible on a phone. And going back to the BRJP, OSHA could have access to project sites and be able to see people's certificates and safety reporting in real time.
Oh, well, even for like other types of jobs, like if they had a government job or a school job, could you plug like a background check or a drug test
Yep.
into this as well? And so
Yes.
how would that work? Do you know?
Well, a lot of schools, universities especially, they require drug testing and background checks. So
So like what would you like not get the badge or not get the ID or not get the credential if you didn't pass your test or something like that?
sure, yes.
Huh. Yeah, I've even heard that like police will come on a site maybe because let's face it, construction doesn't have exactly the most reputable workers sometimes. And I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I've heard that the police will even try to come and look for people on site and that it's impossible to find them. Do you know of anything like that happening?
Yes, I love construction industry, and the workers are always great people, in my experience. I have had colleagues that have been on project sites where a worker has had an arrest warrant, and they were looking for such worker, and it was, hard to track down because he was one of 150 people on site and no one really knew he was there that day. And a lot of things like that could be.
So really like right now, if you're the manager on site and someone says, "Hey, where's John?" You probably don't even know who I am, do you?
No. Another thing
I mean,
about
you know who I am, but you wouldn't know who I am, who I
yeah,
was, right?
yes, exactly.
Interesting.
A lot of people have similar names too. There could be 10 Johns on the site.
Well, so it sounds like this solution lets you know like who they are, if they're compliant, and if they did any work that day, right?
And some of these apps, specifically virtual badge, can get really detailed. You can have scan-ins per floor, so you can have people checking in to a single floor. Sometimes contractors will only work on one floor for weeks on end, and then they move to the next floor. So it's easier to track their progress on a floor. So say for example you're in a 10-story building, and you're on the fifth floor, and you're able to track how many plumbers, electricians, drywallers, how long they were on each floor. And at the end of the day, that data can go back to helping project general contractors build out schedules. So you can say, okay, well, for this, I like to use the hotel project because that was one of my more recent projects. You can say, well, this hotel was 5 stories. We know that it took the drywaller 2 weeks to get through each floor. So when you go to build out a schedule, you can know exactly how long it takes in real time based off of real data to build out a schedule. It takes a lot of the guesswork out.
And that probably helps for future projects too, because you know that if it's a 5-story building, it probably takes this much time, right?
Yep,
And then
exactly.
that probably helps you know how many people to hire and if there was extra hours that didn't get worked, right?
Correct.
That's really interesting. Huh. Well, it sounds like this solution is pretty useful for construction and possibly some other industries. I think that we're going to be taking another break pretty soon, but when we get back, Julie Tolan, construction management professional, and I, John Simion, will recap our discussion and we'll continue to talk about a little bit other ways that you might be able to use something like digital identity for your company and your organization.